It all started the first spring after I moved into the subdivision, the kind of place where the lawns were mowed in perfect diagonal patterns, every mailbox looked cloned from the one beside it, and the HOA newsletter arrived in the mailbox like a sermon from the Mount, reminding everyone of rules about paint shades, trash bins, and even how tall your grass could be before some committee member knocked on your door with a clipboard and a forced smile. And it didn't take long for me to notice that living here meant more than paying dues. It meant stepping carefully through the minefield of people like Karen, the self-declared queen of the cul-de-sac, a woman in her mid-50s with a permanently pinched expression as though the entire world had wronged her, who wore oversized sunglasses even on cloudy mornings, drove her golf cart around the neighborhood like a patrol car, and somehow had her nose in everyone's business. And I mean, everyone's, because within the first week, she had introduced herself to me by way of telling me my trash can had been out on the curb 20 minutes too early, as though time-stamping my introduction with disapproval, and from that moment on, she seemed to take me on as a personal project, watching me, commenting on my hedges, my porch light, the way I parked just slightly to the left of my driveway lines, and even the frequency of my Amazon deliveries, which at first I laughed off because who cares how often a person orders books, tools, or the occasional gadget. But then the laughter dried up when packages began to vanish, small at first, an envelope here, a padded mailer there, and I thought maybe it was the delivery service misplacing things or porch pirates driving through. But then it happened again and again, larger. Boxes disappearing, ones I had photo confirmations of, and when I contacted the carrier, they swore it was delivered to my porch, even providing time-stamped proof. And that's when I began to notice that every time something went missing, Karen was conveniently out walking her little yappy dog, Muffin, circling my block like a shark in the shallows, and sometimes I'd catch her eyes flicking toward my porch before darting away, her lips curling in that smug smirk that I came to recognize as her victory face, but because it was just suspicion and no evidence, I couldn't confront her, though the neighborhood gossip mill whispered stories, packages from others had gone. Missing, too, garden tools, electronics, clothes, even groceries. But nobody had the guts to accuse Karen because she was tight with the HOA board, practically running it without the title, and everyone feared her ability to slap fines or send letters that could bleed you dry with nuisance complaints. So I quietly installed a small camera disguised as a doorbell. And sure enough, within days I had my smoking gun. Karen, striding up my porch in broad daylight, glancing around theatrically as though she thought herself invisible, snatching my Amazon box with one hand while gripping Muffin's leash with the other, then hustling off like some cartoon villain, her oversized sun hat bobbing with every step. And when I watched the footage, my anger was so sharp it felt like glass in my chest, because it wasn't just theft. It was the boldness, the arrogance, the assumption she could do whatever she wanted without consequence. And I realized I had two options. I could go to the HOA board or the police, but both were tangled up in politics and pettiness, and given her connections, she would likely weasel out, maybe even turn the tables and fine me for some obscure infraction. So instead of going the conventional route, I decided to think differently, and that's when the idea hit me. Not just to catch her, not just to expose her, but to humiliate her in a way she couldn't spin. Something so messy, so undeniable, that the entire neighborhood would see the truth. And the thought made me grin as I remembered all those YouTube videos of glitter bombs designed to punish porch pirates, packages rigged with pressurized chambers, that exploded harmless but spectacularly in showers of glitter that clung to skin, carpet, pets, everything, impossible to vacuum fully, turning a thief's home into a disco nightmare. And the more I thought about it, the more it felt perfect, poetic even. A kind of justice Karen couldn't escape because glitter was eternal. Glitter lived forever. Glitter was the scarlet letter in tiny, sparkling form. And so I started sketching. Plans late at night, watching tutorials, sourcing supplies. and daydreaming about the look on Karen's face when she got her sticky fingers on what she thought was another prize, only for it to backfire in the most spectacular way possible. But while I worked, I still had to live with her shadow hovering. And each day she seemed to grow bolder, sometimes waving at me with fake sweetness when I drove past, other times letting Muffin relieve herself on my lawn while pretending not to notice, and once, I swear, she even followed a delivery truck down the street just to see what was being dropped off at each house, her golf cart rolling slowly behind like some deranged parade float. And by then my annoyance had crystallized into resolve, because if someone didn't stand up to her, she'd keep terrorizing everyone under the HOA banner. And though I wasn't the type to make waves, I found myself secretly relishing the idea of being the one to finally put her in her place, imagining the neighbors' gasps, the laughter, the undeniable proof of her crimes sparkling all over her prim pastel-colored outfits. And so section 1 of my story ends with me standing in my garage late at night, staring at the half-finished glitter bomb package on my workbench, my hands trembling not from fear, but from excitement, because after months of enduring Karen's smug little kingdom, I was about to strike back in a way she would never forget. And the stage was set for the glitter storm to come. The plan was simple in concept but complex in execution, and as the days ticked by, I became obsessed with every detail, because if Karen suspected even for a moment that she was being set up, she'd back off, and all the suspense would collapse, like a bad magic trick. So I worked late nights in my garage, tinkering with an old cardboard box, wiring up a small pressurized canister loaded with ultra-fine glitter, the kind used in arts and crafts that doesn't just shake off, but embeds itself into fabric and hair, combining it with a harmless dye powder that puffed into the air on release. And as I tested prototypes with my gloves and mask on, I began to feel like some vigilante scientist in a secret lab, giggling under my breath at the thought of Karen's prim and perfect world being cracked open by a rainbow explosion. But the true genius of the plan wasn't just the glitter, it was the bait. Because I filled the package with decoy items, bubble-wrapped nothing that rattled convincingly, taped it up with Amazon-style precision, and slapped on a shipping label I'd printed at home, making it indistinguishable from the dozens of real deliveries that came to my porch. And once it was ready, I set the box on my doorstep like a sacrificial offering, and waited, my hidden camera recording every angle, my heart thudding as I pretended to go about normal life while secretly watching through my phone. And the first day, nothing happened. The second day, she walked by with Muffin and gave the box a long look, but didn't touch it. And I began to worry that maybe she was catching on. But by the third day, my patience was rewarded when, at precisely 10:37 a.m., Karen came striding across the street, wearing a floral blouse and wide-brimmed hat, glancing left and right like a cartoon burglar, then crouching down and scooping the package into her arms as casually as if it belonged to her, Muffin tugging impatiently on the leash, and I swear I held my breath as she hustled back to her house, clutching her prize, and within minutes I saw the payoff through the camera feed I'd hidden inside the package. She plopped it on her spotless white living room rug, tore the tape with a kitchen knife, and the moment the flaps opened, boom! The glitter bomb went off in a glorious eruption, shimmering clouds of pink, gold, and neon green filling the air like a miniature supernova, coating her blouse, her hair, her expensive furniture, even poor Muffin who yelped and darted under a glitter-smeared sofa, and the sight was so glorious, so utterly absurd, that I laughed until tears streamed down my face, the sound muffled behind my hands as I replayed the footage again and again, watching Karen stagger back coughing, her eyes wide in horror, her perfect home transformed into a disco nightmare in seconds. And the more she tried to brush it off, the worse it got, glitter embedding in her skin, clinging to her furniture, floating in the air every time she moved, and she screamed, oh how she screamed, shrieking Muffin's name, cursing, stamping her feet, waving her arms like some wild bird coated in sequins, And though I knew the footage would be enough, the aftermath turned out to be even better, because the glitter escaped her front door when she opened it to throw the ruined package away, carried on the breeze across her porch and into the street, sticking to her golf cart, her driveway, even drifting into her neighbors' yards, leaving a sparkling trail of evidence for anyone paying attention and pay. Attention they did, because by evening the whole cul-de-sac was buzzing, people whispering, pointing, some even daring to laugh openly when Karen marched down the street in fury, her blouse permanently stained with neon specks, her hair shimmering like tinsel, trying in vain to act as though nothing had happened while clearly panicking, and though she attempted to downplay it, claiming she'd been the victim of some cruel prank by local kids. My footage was already circulating privately, shared with a few trusted neighbors who spread it like wildfire, and within days it reached nearly every homeowner, and suddenly Karen's power cracked, because now people had proof, irrefutable, hilarious proof, that she was the package thief, and the once feared HOA queen was the subject of whispers, giggles, and sideways glances. Yet rather than admit defeat, she doubled down, storming to my door with a clipboard and some trumped-up complaint about my lawn edging, glitter still clinging to her eyelashes as she shrieked about community standards. But I simply smiled, recorded the interaction, and asked her if she wanted to explain how the glitter got in her hair, and the look on her face when she realized I wasn't backing down was priceless, a mixture of rage, panic, and humiliation, and still the glitter spread, because that's the thing about glitter. It never goes away. It clings forever, and soon it had embedded itself into the very fabric of her life, showing up on her clothes at HOA meetings, sparkling in her car seats, even spotted in the muffins she brought to a bake sale, and the neighbors began to joke that she'd been cursed, unable to scrub away the mark of her own crime. And every time I saw her, I thought back to that first eruption, the burst of color, the shriek of shock, and the satisfaction of knowing justice had been served in the most poetic, hilarious way possible. But the real twist, the part that turned glitter from prank into legend, was yet to come. Because Karen wasn't done, and neither was I. And though she thought she could claw back her reputation with lies and intimidation, she had underestimated the power of evidence, of community laughter, and of glitter itself. And that's how Section 2 ends, with the neighborhood buzzing, Karen unraveling under a storm of sparkle, and me holding the ace up my sleeve, the footage that would make her downfall undeniable. If Section 2 had been the glitter-soaked eruption of justice, Section 3 became the long burn of downfall, because though Karen's shrieks had echoed across the cul-de-sac as her house turned into a shimmering funhouse, she was far too stubborn, far too drunk on years of unchecked power to retreat quietly, and instead she doubled and tripled down, calling an emergency HOA meeting where she showed up still faintly sparkling under the fluorescent lights, trying to spin the narrative into one of victimhood, claiming she had been targeted by some mysterious criminal, that her home had been attacked, and that the true crime wasn't her thefts, but the slanderous gossip spreading through the neighborhood. But as she waved her arms and glitter rained onto the polished conference table, it was impossible for anyone to take her seriously, and people chuckled, covered their mouths, avoided eye contact with her blazing eyes, while I sat back in my chair with my phone queued up, waiting. And when she finally pointed a glitter-dusted finger at me and accused me of leading a campaign against her, I calmly tapped play, projecting the doorbell footage onto the screen at the front of the room. And in that moment, silence fell. Silence so heavy you could hear the hum of the overhead fan, as the screen showed Karen striding across my porch, scooping up the package, waddling off with her yappy dog, and then the glitter eruption from the hidden camera inside. A perfect high-definition shot of her shrieking in her living room as glitter exploded over every inch of her body, and the room erupted, some people gasping, others laughing outright, and Karen's face turned a shade of crimson I didn't know humans could achieve. But still she tried to bluster, claiming the footage was doctored, that it was some kind of deep fake, but the evidence was undeniable, and the HOA board members, who once trembled under her glare, began to exchange glances, then lean toward each other, whispering, realizing perhaps for the first time that their queen bee had been exposed. And when I added in the screenshots of delivery confirmations, the record of my repeated complaints, and the testimonies from neighbors whose packages had also vanished, the case became unassailable, so much so that one of the quieter board members stood up and said, "Karen, we can't ignore this anymore." And that single sentence cracked her throne in two, because in that instant she lost control of the narrative, her long reign of intimidation collapsing under the weight of glitter that still sparkled from her blazer lapel. And though she stormed out vowing revenge, the tide had turned. Neighbors who once muttered in fear now openly mocked her, some even leaving small packets of glitter in her mailbox, others tying sparkly bows to her fence, and the gossip that once gave her power now chewed her to pieces. Yet Karen, being Karen, refused to admit defeat, filing bogus HOA violation notices against me. Too many solar lights, trash bins too visible, mailbox paint slightly faded. But every time she tried to corner me, I countered with footage, with documents, with sheer unflappable calm, and slowly her power evaporated like mist in the sun, until finally, the HOA board voted her out, stripping her of her last weapon, and that's when things went from neighborhood drama to full-on spectacle. Because Karen couldn't just fade away, she had to make a scene. So one night she marched to my driveway with a bucket of water and threw it across my car, thinking she'd scare me. But the bucket had been sitting in her glitter-infested garage, and instead of humiliation, it only gave me another piece of evidence. My car shimmering under the streetlight, captured on camera as she fled in her golf cart, and when the police finally got involved, thanks to the stack of reports and the footage of her thefts, vandalism, and threats, it was like the floodgates opened, neighbors lining up with their own stories, their own evidence, their own petty grievances that suddenly didn't seem so small when added together. And the woman who once weaponized the HOA was now facing real charges, real fines, and the real possibility of losing the house she had so smugly lorded over us all from. But even as the legal process churned forward, the glitter clung, showing. Up in her court appearances, in her car when she drove past, in her hair when she tried to glare at me from across the street. And in the end, that was the true justice. Not just the exposure, not just the fall from power, but the permanence of glitter itself. The way it seeped into her life like karma made tangible, because no matter how she scrubbed, vacuumed, or denied, it remained. A constant reminder of the moment she was caught, the moment the community laughed, the moment she lost everything. And as for me, I became something of a local legend, the guy who took down the HOA tyrant with nothing more than creativity, patience, and a well-rigged package, and while I never set out to be a hero, I can't deny the satisfaction that comes with walking down the street and seeing neighbors smile instead of look away, or the small thank you notes slipped into my mailbox from people who had been too afraid to speak up, and life in the neighborhood shifted, lighter, freer. The shadow lifted, though every now and then I still find a fleck of glitter on my shoes, a reminder of the battle fought and won, and I smile because it means Karen's mark lingers, not as her victory, but as her defeat, sparkling proof that sometimes the best. Revenge isn't loud or violent, but clever, funny, and impossible to sweep under the rug. And that is how the saga ends, with Karen forced to sell her house, moving out under cover of night, her car trailing glitter down the street like a comet vanishing into the distance, while the neighborhood she once ruled erupts in quiet relief, and me, standing on my porch with Muffin. Yes, Muffin. Because in the end, she left even the dog behind, stroking his glitter-speckled fur, and thinking that sometimes, just sometimes, the universe really does hand justice back in the most ridiculous and perfect way possible.